This initial setup was found in the Asia server. I'll link the video that I saw in the description. The whole thing was in Chinese though, so I have no idea what he said, and I kind of had to figure it out myself anyways. Somebody decided to abuse the increased damage taken stacking mechanic by using Alexa's double hit S1 and Dust Devil instead of dual attacks. I initially thought this team was going to be pretty broken, because if you combine Dust Devil and dual attacks, you could get 4 stacks on each phase and end up with 8. But it turns out that's not the case. So here's a run where I got a Dust Devil proc at the end of phase 1 and also at the end of phase 2. Slowing it down, you can see that the stacks go to 5, and then the next hit, it's still 5. This means that the increased damage taken stacks cap out at 5, and also means that damage isn't going to be as high as I thought it was. The thing is, compared to the Stina team, this team is still much easier to do, because the odds of a Dust Devil proc are so much higher than a dual attack. If you're looking for just top 100, I think this team is definitely the best one because of how much easier it is to do. I'll be comparing the odds of getting a successful run onto the Stina team versus the Alexa team, and also trying to calculate what my top damage would have been with my setup. So I can't be bothered to keep on spamming runs until I get a perfect run, so we're just going to calculate my top damage instead. This is the damage I dealt at the end of phase 1, end of phase 2, and end of phase 3 on a run where I got no dual attacks and no Dust Devil procs. One thing to keep in mind is my damage is a little bit lower than my theoretical cap because I'm running Alexa as a tank instead of a DPS. So I'm probably losing out on like maybe a million or a little bit more damage, but here is the damage values used in just the phases. And if we take the damage boost that we would have had if we got both the Dust Devil proc and a dual attack, which would be 4, or one or the other, which would be 3, and divide it by the amount that we actually had during the run, which was only 2 because we had no procs, we can do this for phase 1 or phase 2, and then for phase 3, it would be 5 stacks versus 4. So we can do phase 1 plus phase 2 times this, plus phase 3 times this, and if we were looking for both a dual attack and a Dust Devil proc at the end of phase 1, we would have had 51 million, and if we were looking for one or the other, we would have had 49 million. Like I mentioned, this is a little bit lower technically because I could have run Alexa as a DPS instead of a tank, but this is what my run would more or less cap out on with my setup. And here we can compare the odds of finishing a run with the Alexa team versus the Stina team. So a bad duel is there's the dual attacks chances when you enter break phase, and with Gaither's S1 in the middle of break phase. But in the Alexa team, you can actually use somebody besides your tank S1 to enter, or you need to use somebody besides your tank S1 to enter the phase. Which means that you can use Gaither S2 or Alot's S3 to enter the phase instead, which removes any chance of a dual attack. So depending on how many times you're allowed to get that rotation, you could increase the odds of your success by a lot, and reduce the odds of getting a bad dual attack. So we're going to be looking at 3 mostly, because that's what my setup runs. So 2.102% chance of getting a Dust Devil proc and a dual attack at the end of phase 1, compared to the double dual attack with the Stina team. It's lower if you have 3 unity sets, but higher if you have 2 or less. And then if you're looking for one or the other, which would only be about like a 2 or 3 million damage loss, the odds are much higher than anything else here. Even looking for just one dual attack with the Stina team is pretty low odds. Now let's take a look at their gear. First up is the case, because there's one thing that does change. Since we're not using Warhorn on this team, you could swap this Fan of Light and Dark out for a Warhorn instead. Fan of Light and Dark does have a higher damage potential, but this RNG chance to proc would make your runs less stable. You'd swap your Gaither from 300 crit damage to 350 as well, and it would be a close damage value. Aside from that, just a bunch of speed with a good amount of bulk. Next up is Gaither. Like I mentioned, if you're using Warhorn instead of Fan of Light and Dark, you want to be at 350 crit damage, 300 if you are using Fan. Crit chance, the boss is Dark, so you get 15% from there, and also POS gives you 3 stacks by the end of phase 1, so you could drop this down to 79 if you wanted to. Attack, just max it out. Destruction and Torrent sets. Torrent's not giving a full 10%, so if you're stuck with crit set, that's fine, especially if you're getting much better stats with it. Torrent set's probably actually a 3 to 4% damage increase, which is still solid, but not a full 10%. The healing E is pretty mandatory, because we're pretty reliant on his healing during this run. And if you don't have POS, then Cruel Mischief is fine. Then we've got Alots. For Alots, you just want them super fast with some bulk. This attack has come on a flat attack neck. Ideally, you'd want to be on an HP or defense neck. Spirit's Breath, mandatory. If you don't have it plus 30, you'd be resetting way more often whenever it doesn't proc. And then there's Alexa, who has two different builds you could run. If you're running her as a tank in the front versus a DPS in the back or side, it would change her build. I have her as a tank because I found it easier to tune. For this, you just build her with a 100 crit chance because the whole run hinges on her double hit S1, which needs you to crit. And then you would just give the rest of her stats into bulk. With Dust Devil being mandatory, and the team attack imprint, because Gaither is the one doing most of our damage. If you're running her as a DPS instead, you would give her Destruction, Torrent, or Crit Set, and just build her full damage with at least 100% crit. And with that, let's take a look at her run. The fight works mostly the same as usual. We do the bare minimum amount of healing, and we try to push Yuffie into the break phase as fast as we can. It's extra important for this comp, because we want to enter phase 3 with as many turns left as possible. I'll explain why once we actually get there. To start off though, just start hitting her with your S1s. Coming up on Alexa's turn, it's worth mentioning that you can use S1 or S2. You do need S2 available for break phase, but this CR push is something that S1 doesn't have. If you have the skill tree runes, then S2 will still give more CR push than S1. And if that extra CR gives you a better rotation, then you should factor it into your runs. Alot's duel here, so we're going to S3 to remove the CR from S1 and just pray he doesn't duel again. And we're going to skip healing here, because even though we get kind of close to dying, Alexa is going to be able to tank this S1, and Gaither is going to be able to tank those bleed procs, and he can heal us up. Still not time to heal, because we can survive this S3. Even with all these bleeds on, Akades cuts everybody, so she can cleanse off the bleeds and heal. So now we can A-Loss sets to Alexa to sync their speeds together. And it's also a good time to mention that a break phase with an Alexa team is going to look very different. Because since Alexa's S1 hits 2 times or 3 if you proc Dust Devil, this means that if you enter break phase with Alexa S1, you'll remove the amount of hits that you can do during break phase itself, and we can't use her skills either because we need those and her cooldowns are too long. So instead I'll be entering break phase with Gaither, because since Alexa's hitting the boss during break phase and we need to end it with her S1, Gaither only has 5 turns to work with during break phase, and we can use S2 here without losing any damage. This also removes any chance of a dual attack occurring during that turn that we would normally have in a Destina team. So we're going to push Akades up here to push our fan cycling up. And we can't actually fish for that many fan procs because, like I mentioned, we need to end the fight on Alexa's 3rd turn, whereas normally in the Destina team, we'd end it before her 4th turn. So it's one whole less turn for us to work with. We start with S3 here on Gaither because there's only 5 turns, so our rotation goes 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. 5 turns for our maximum possible damage. We didn't get a fan proc there, which kind of sucks. We just keep on pushing Gaither until pretty much the end of the phase, where we can do a little bit more tuning. So now we need to end the break phase before Alexa takes her next turn. Or not end it, we need to leave it with 1 hit before Alexa takes her next turn. So we missed out on our fan proc, but here after we push up Gaither and Akades uses her S3, Alots is going to just barely cut ahead of Gaither, so we can push up Akades one last time to both sync their speeds and also use her S2 on herself, so we can fish for a fan proc, which we got, so now S3 will have crit damage buff, and it also makes Akades S3 available going into the next phase. Now it's Alexa's time to shine. If you're looking for just top 100, I would reset if you don't get either a Dust Devil proc or a dual attack here, because you probably want to hit the cap of the increased damage taken stacks, and it would suck having to reset if you make it past the second phase 2 and also don't proc there. So to save time, you might as well just reset here. If you're trying to maximize your damage, then you would want both a Dust Devil proc and a dual attack this turn. Let's see which one we get. So we get neither, but it doesn't affect the actual tuning of our run. It would just lower the amount of damage we deal. So I'm just gonna keep on going. Katie's S3 here to heal up. And we're still pretty much full HP, so I'm not going to heal with Gaither just yet. We're just going to S1 for now. Heal us S1 again, so we're going to S3 to remove the CR. Now we can heal up with Gaither S2. And we're going to hold the Katie's S3 until Euphina uses her S3. We landed the attack down there, which is very unlucky because I don't want that since it makes it look like since we'll be taking less damage from it. I survive anyways just from testing. Just gotta trust me on that one. The Alots barely survives there, even without the attack down he would have been fine. And Katie's cuts ahead of Gaither here so he won't die. He lost also 15% to the bleed there, but he would have been fine even if he didn't. And we can push up Gaither and once again enter break phase with this S2. If we didn't get the attack down and Alots didn't resist the bleed, he would be pretty low HP here, and we'd actually need this heal on this S2 to keep him alive. One thing you'll notice is that our fan has swapped from our S2 to our S3, so we have to push a Katie's up here in order to get a fan proc before we start pushing Gaither again. We got our fan proc, and now we just keep on pushing Gaither for a while. We missed out on our fan proc earlier, and here we actually have enough room to push up a Katie's, so we can fish for one more fan proc. Moving this fan proc up makes it so it covers both Gaither's 4th and 5th hits instead of just his 5th hit. Now here's Gaither's final hit of the phase. So Alots is going to just barely cut Alexa here. You could push up Alexa just to end the phase. I'm going to push up Gaither because I know that he won't cut Alexa, and this gives me a better cycling going into the last phase. No proc again, so we don't hit the damage cap. So this is where it gets annoying. The goal of phase 3 is to kill Alexa before the run ends. The problem is that there's a lot of RNG involved because you can't resist the bleeds on the S3 here. You can resist the strip and the bleed from S2. So if those get resisted, Alexa's going to take way less damage during the phase, and you're going to have to pretty much play this phase 3 completely by ear, pretty much. Just, you'll have to try and just eyeball and see what works. So we resisted a bleed there and not the strip. So I think Alexa is going to live at the end. We will see what happens. Either way, after this S2, it's time for us to S3 and heal. Oh, I guess I cleansed there, so it doesn't matter if she resists that bleed. The important ones are this one. Not this one. This one comes from the Manic Trauma, so she can't resist that. The important one is the one on the S2 after. This S2, if she resists the bleed there, she's probably going to survive that. I S2'd with Alexa there, and I'm going to S2 her here to set up for her death. So now we can push up Alexa and just kill her. From here, the next turn does get kind of dangerous because, or not the next turn, the turn after this does get kind of dangerous because this S1 does a lot of damage. Usually it hits the front row, so it wouldn't be an issue, but there is no front row now, so it's going to hit somebody completely random. First up is the S2, which we can just heal up. And Gaither's Barrier is actually going to play a pretty crucial role in keeping everybody alive. The only person here who can die is Alots, so I'm going to S2 Alots to heal him a bit. Now we can S2 for the Barrier and heal. So, Gaither got pretty close to dying, but Akade's going to be able to cut in front here and heal him up. And we're going to push Gaither up here, because if we don't, then Euphane would cut him and he would take extra damage from the bleeds, because he would have to move twice, instead of only going to move once. We won't have to take any damage from the bleed procs. Now I'm going to S2 myself again, and Alots. He's going to get a fan proc there, which sucks, but we're going to have time. We're going to use S3 here instead of S1, so we don't dual attack. So we still have attack buff left over. And the thing is since we have this attack buff, we can just push up Akades instead. The nice thing about having only a 3-person in Break 3 is that this phase is kind of funny because we're only really gated by Gaither at this point, so we can just keep on spamming Akades. Just keep on pushing for fan procs. So we got a fan proc there, so I'm going to push Gaither here, because you do need to maintain attack buff on him. But Gaither S3 does apply attack buff to the ally with the highest attack, which includes him. So after we use this, we'll still have a 2-turn attack buff, and we have much more room to just keep on spam pushing Akades. Ideally, you'd want him to always be at a 2-turn crit damage buff. Depends on how safe you want to play it. We got the proc there. And I'm just going to keep on pushing Akades just to account for any worst case RNG scenarios. Didn't get the proc there, so keep on pushing her. He still has attack buffs, but I don't have to S2 him with Aloth until next turn. It would be a good idea to keep note of uh, how fast your ALOS goes relative to your Gaither, because you want to make sure that you're not skipping out on an attack buff turn. So here I could push Acades. I'm not sure which one's safe, but either way we got our crit damage buff, so I'm just going to push up Gaither. And from here I don't need to push him anymore, so all of my ALOS S2s can go into Acades. Nice, we got our crit damage buff. So we actually don't really need to spam push Acades anymore. What I am going to do is, so if I push Gaither here, Acades will go first. We need Acades to go first because this is the last hit. And we're going to S2 onto Gaither, give him his S2 back for a little bit of extra damage. So overall, Selecta team performs pretty well. The two top highest scores are still using the Stina, though it's a little bit hard to say whether the Stina or Alexa caps out at a higher score because these people have much better gear than I do. I calculated my run to be at 51 million, which would place me in 4th, but with the extra damage, if I had Alexa as a DPS, my theoretical cap would probably push me into number 3 maybe. The main thing about the Alexa team, though, is how much easier it is to run. With the much higher chances of getting a Dust Devil proc or a dual attack, giving you over a 30% or over a 20% win rate. If you're looking for just one top 100, this team is definitely the way to go.